I worked hard while my girlfriend, who didn't have any friends or family, stayed at home all day scrolling through TikTok. When I finally tried to break up with her, she collapsed on the floor crying. I met a girl from a very different background when I was 20. I was middle class, trying to find a cheaper way to go to college, while she was living in almost poverty because her parents forced her to buy her way through school. She dropped out of school after about a year, while I continued and finished during her first year. We started dating and she moved into my apartment. She doesn't have much contact with her parents and she only has 1 or 2 friends outside of school who she knows from high school. I make around $80,000 a year, so we live relatively comfortably, but there's still some strain on finances. I'm not sure exactly when I started to feel this way, but her refusal to work, her desire to eat out every day, her lack of interest in school, and her constant spending on clothes and other items has gradually started to grate on me. I work in a female-dominated workplace, where I interact with colleagues who have a lot going for them, have fun hobbies, and have aspirations. It's made it all the more difficult when your girlfriend is chronically she spends 7 hours a day online, scrolling through Instagram or TikTok reels and thinking that having sex is all she needs to do on her end. Our relationship isn't bad, we have fights every now and then, like an average couple, have an active sex life, but that's pretty much it from her perspective. If I broke up with her it would be out of nowhere, but I'm pretty much done and know I could move on quickly and have nothing to regret. I know it sounds bad, but the real problem is that she has no job, no money, almost no friends and no family support. I'm not a monster. I don't want to make someone homeless, but I don't want to be stuck with someone who is too. I don't know what to do. Process of working this out. Update 1. I've been advised to start hiding anything valuable, but I've already told you that she came from a poor background. Her father is a laborer, while her mother also lives a similar lifestyle to how she lives now. Their home is maybe 1,100 square feet in a terrible place in town. Given her father's ultimatum, I don't think he will take her back, as she hasn't been back home in years. I've spoken to her about this maybe 3 times since January. I've either gently suggested she goes out more and finds a hobby, or told her she's wasting away on her phone. She needs to get a job or go back to school. Each time, she either changes the subject, makes it a joke, or follows through for a couple of days before going back to her usual self. She's a kind partner who asks me about my day and always tries to make she makes me laugh or lightens the mood when I get annoyed and shows a lot of affection, which makes me feel terrible when that doesn't work anymore. I just see her as another person now. Last night, when we were both getting ready for bed, I didn't take my clothes off. Instead, I just stood there and told her we needed to talk. At first, she was just smiling and jumping up and down on the bed with her knees, thinking I wasn't as serious as I was. But eventually she was able to read the mood. I told her something wasn't feeling right anymore. I've tried to make this work. I've been patient with her for the past few years. But I didn't know how much more time I was willing to spend waiting for her to get a job, go back to school or just get a hobby. If anything, I told her that it annoyed and frustrated me. She just didn't seem to care about herself. And I hated that. She didn't have any goals or aspirations. This was probably the first time in a long time that she was as attentive as she's ever been during a conversation. She agreed to whatever I was saying and even gave suggestions on where she can apply, what courses were starting to interest her, and said I could look over her as she submitted applications online to make sure she wasn't lying. It seemed like I was still willing to make this work, and part of me believed this would finally be it was a difficult moment for both of us. At first, I told her I didn't love her the same way. This eventually led to me saying I didn't feel anything at all about this relationship and was jaded. I was tired and wanted a fresh start with someone who was more goal-oriented and wanted something more out of life. When she realized what I was getting at, she started to cry and asked why I didn't. I should have mentioned this sooner. I told her I've always asked her to cook, go out with me, try something out, or go back to school. I even offered to pay for her classes. She said she understood, but was upset that I didn't say it was leading to me losing interest in her. From her perspective, it seemed as if I still loved her all the same. She started apologizing, saying she wasn't in the right mental state and saying nothing was. I tried to motivate her, but she didn't seem interested in any hobbies. The only thing she liked was spending time with me, which is all she looked forward to in the day. When I came home, none of this was really affecting my emotions, so I tried to continue. I think her lifestyle would be better with another person, but she immediately cut me off and became more panicked. She started to apologize again for what she'd done and said she would be a better girlfriend. She said she'd go with me tomorrow, wherever I wanted to go, and look for courses in August that she could start doing. She didn't want to lose me, since she had nothing else in life. She absolutely hated that I'd stopped loving her. There were so many tears and snot that I said we'd have this conversation again when she calmed down. We eventually did, in an hour or so. She pleaded for 2 months to make a change and give her another chance. She promised she'd change again. She listed all the places she'd apply to and said she'd be a better partner. I never wanted to make her homeless, so this seemed like a good settlement, even though I still had my doubts. I then reaffirmed that I wanted to see other people, but she seemed much more adamant on this issue than the aspirations issue. She said, just give her a month to try and make the relationship work, and she kept asking me what she could do to make me love her again and that she didn't want me to hate her. She said that this was the worst part of it all, in the only person that she had just been done with. She seemed like she was about to break down again, so I said, okay, we'll see how this relationship is in a month. I also didn't want her to suffer a complete mental breakdown while I was still living with her. So I gave her a month to let her fix the relationship, which I thought would give her enough time to accept things. I slept on the couch last night and will probably continue doing so for a while. She came out at about 3 a.m. wanting to talk some more, but I said I was exhausted and we would do it tomorrow. She then slept on the floor beside me for the rest of the night. I apologized again when I told her to stop. She said okay and sobbed for a bit under her blanket. That's everything that's happened so far. This was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I regret nothing and feel much better. I let everything out. I don't know how this situation will be in 2 months, but I was firm that it was the deadline. This post will probably get buried, so I probably won't do. I'm posting another update since I don't think anyone will care about this in a week or a month. I'll definitely private message those of you who have been helping me through this and those who just want to be updated. Thanks. Edit, for all of you who keep asking what my workplace is, I'll post it here. I've been making small or inconsequential updates elsewhere because this is only for those who want to read them. I want everyone who has private messaged me to know I've read them all, especially those of you who have gone through similar circumstances as me and have shared your stories. I've been doing some self-reflection and think I know how I want to go about this, which will help with my lack of communication skills. I know I'm not a perfect person, but I still stand by my decisions. I made that night 100% through and through. I might post an update sooner in a week or so, as the day after our fight I'm filled with a bit more hope than usual. Hi everyone. It's been about a week since my last post, so I thought I'd give you an update. A lot has happened, including the explosion of my first update thread. I now have over 50 DMSs asking me for an update, so instead of copy and pasting replies, I'll do another one. I find it easier to write than to speak in many situations, so this has been a great way to help my decisions and clear my head. Writing everything down has helped tremendously, and I will continue to do so. I'll keep going until this is all over. Then I'll delete everything. After the confrontation at night, we didn't really speak at home for a day or two. It was dry and awkward. But I've been told I'm a workaholic, so it was easy for me to stay at the hospital as a distraction. But in that time, she did start to cook again. We weren't in the mood to go out to eat together. Eventually though, I sat down with her after. She asked for a more in-depth chat about why I felt our relationship was failing. She promised not to get upset, but wanted me to be completely open so she could understand. She said she wanted to try everything to fix this. I was really apprehensive about this, and I can't really explain why. But after being together for 4 years, I wanted to at least make an effort myself out of respect. I feel like I've never had the same from her. In my last update, I mentioned there were a few different options. 1. Kick her out immediately and leave her before it gets worse. 2. Try to fix our relationship or end it. 3. Continue living with someone who would probably become neurotic if I let her stay for 2 months. I considered all these options and read through almost every reply. Even the most outlandish Redditor takes more than a little convincing. I also took a lot of inspiration from people who've shared their past experiences. Some of them have been in loveless relationships for years, while others have been able to overcome their problems and have an even stronger connection. Thank you again for your messages. I read through a lot of your lives for our conversation. She said she saw something on TikTok where couples put a phone on a table with a timer and wanted I suggested we do something similar for each person to wear what made them upset. I said that was a bad idea. If we were going to talk about our problems, it would be better if there was no time limit. She eventually agreed and said I could go first, asking me first when was the time that I completely lost my love in her. As I said before, it was never one action, but a grating feeling that got worse and worse until it got to this point. I told her that, so she then asked when was the time. I felt the most angry. I said it would take some time to think for me, and she said that was fine. After a few minutes, something came to mind. I couldn't find the right words at first, but it eventually just started to come out. I told her the worst time was when I was first starting at my hospital. To keep it short, the pace was brutal. It was non-stop work with little to no downtime. As I was constantly learning new things that school would have never taught me, I had to be able to handle it as a professional. It was the most stressful time of my life. I think other RNs can relate. That year made me realize that hard work does pay off. If you have the drive and the passion, you can make it. I told her I think that was when I started losing feelings the fastest. Seeing her at home doing absolutely nothing, coming home to no food, made me realize she wasn't working a job or learning anything at all. She was completely stuck to the internet with nothing. I told her I was even more upset when I'd suggested jobs with easier schedules or a new interest in school that would work out better than last time, but she'd rejected all my suggestions. I told her I was disgusted, and she asked why I hadn't made this a bigger issue and told her sooner. But I said there are some things you don't have to say. I didn't have to remind her to wash her hands, eat, or do something other than mindlessly scrolling on her phone for hours at a time, every day. I also told her that after coming home from the hospital during more stressful days, the last thing I wanted was to spend my time begging my girlfriend to do something productive. I held my tongue and settled, as she was still nice and caring. I had no other reasons to end it, and so the resentment grew worse from then on. It was around here that I have to admit that I was a bit mean at the time, but I'll still share it because I've got everything else. I told her that when she dropped nursing, I was upset because I felt she was more than capable of doing what I had done. But after spending more time in the relationship and getting to know her better, I realized that with the type of person she was, there was no way she could have ever finished. That's why I suggested easier and more laid-back jobs and less demanding majors for school. I would have appreciated it if she had cooked or found an interesting hobby at that point. It's just the type of person she was, which is why I felt done for her romantically over time. I felt like I'd had my say and was ready to move on. Throughout the conversation, we kept eye contact. There were times it seemed like she would break down, but like she said, she remained calm while I told her what I thought. I said I was done and asked if we could continue the conversation later, but she said she wanted to talk more and locked herself in our room for the rest of the day. The next day, we sat down again and finished the conversation. She told me that she thinks she's depressed. She said she hadn't felt sad before that night. She just had no motivation to do anything. I had a couple of messages telling me to ask her to get tested for ADHD. But when I started bringing it up, she was very adamant that it was not something she felt comfortable with. I knew she didn't like needles or going to the hospital in general. But her flat-out refusal to get tested for disorders when I told her it was not at all like a regular hospital visit surprised me. She asked me if she was able to change her behavior. Would I give her another chance? I said I didn't know. I felt nothing right now and didn't know if her doing it would bring any feeling back, especially since it took my breaking point to do so. She asked if there was any compromise. I told her again that if in a month I felt like there was enough reason to stay together, I would, but that there was no guarantee that my feelings would return. I said I would match any effort she also put in. She was a bit frustrated by my answer, but I told her that was just how it would be. She gave me a piece of paper to look at that she'd been working on last night. It had a list of hobbies and interests she wanted to look into. The two major ones were photography and cooking. She told me that she was looking into these while also showing her phone. She was applying for some entry-level positions in Glasgow that she might get hired in. I told her that if she could show enough passion or interest in these hobbies, I wouldn't care about her working just anything to improve herself. But if she didn't do anything at all, it would be best to look for a new job to help her if she moves out. I've also been asked in private messages if I have any personal friends to talk to. There are 2 female coworkers I can find some information about, and given how many hours we work together at our hospital, and why I completely trust them. They're very grounded. They both said I would eventually get love-bombed and that this would all go back to how it once was. They said I needed to stand firm and move on. They have very helpful friends who have even offered to let me stay over for a few nights. They said I would fall for her manipulation if I continued being anywhere near her. But it didn't feel right since I'm still technically in a relationship. I'd consider it if the situation got worse, but I still find them to be grounded. I always try to take their advice to heart, even though many of you have told me this will be a mistake. I want to make the attempt to give this one last try, even though I feel closed off and indifferent about our current situation. Many of you have told me this can change with enough work from both parties. I've also taken the advice of those saying I've been trying to cut off sex, which was my intention from the start anyway, by continuing to sleep in the living room. But each day she has been sleeping on the floor right below me, even when I tell her I'd rather be alone with my thoughts. She says this is something she would not accept, but that's everything so far. I'll probably give you another update at the end of the month, as there's nothing else I feel like I need to say for now. I'm just waiting to see if things can get better. Now that we're working on this, I thought I'd give you an update. Hello. A lot has happened in the past 2 weeks. It's actually felt more like a month with how much has gone down. I've been in touch with those I have DM'd with on Reddit about my situation. Sorry I haven't been replying. At some point a week ago, my messages blew up again with another 100 plus, so I took a break and haven't logged in for a while. I'm working on my situation. I'm going to stop posting in subreddits about my problems and instead write about everything that comes to mind here on my page. I'm more comfortable doing that than posting on other sites. My girlfriend was very proactive last week. She was full of energy and tried to get interested in lots of different things. I kept my promise and tried to help her in whatever way I could. The only thing she's really been interested in is his photography. I've said before that she has a lot of clothes that she's had over the years and she sold a few of them on Depop to get enough money to get a Canon 250D camera, which she says is good for starting out. She's looked a lot more into this than me. I strongly assume she stuck with this hobby as it gave her a chance to. She kept asking me to go out into the city to take pictures and test out her camera. I'd promised to match her energy and I didn't want to be a hypocrite, so I did. Even when I came home from longer shifts at the hospital, there was a major change in her behavior. She was usually a very loving and affectionate partner, but during the first week she was like that for about 8 times a day. She was always asking me how I was doing, if I was upset, what I wanted to do for the rest of the day, etc. She was just trying to gauge my mood. When we went out, her PDA was also maxed. She wanted to kiss, hold hands and spend the night out as long as possible. Even when I said I had to go in early to work the next day, it was hard to describe in words what she was doing. I don't know if it was exactly love bombing, but with the energy I was bracing myself for a crash and it did happen during the 2nd week. I'll talk about that in another post. There was only so much I could handle before I needed a break, especially with how I was still feeling after everything that had happened prior. My friends at work are the only other people I have been engaging with and I've told them everything that has been happening. They warned me again that I was getting love bombed like they predicted and it would only get worse. They asked me what I'd do if I was stuck with her longer than 2 months. I said my lease would be ending soon, so it was helping ease my mind as I wouldn't mind moving if this all turned out for the worse, while still giving her enough time to prepare. They said they were concerned that I was coming to work more tired than usual, but I told them that I felt fine during the weekend. They had insisted that I go out. I was feeling pretty down, so I went with them to help my mood. They said that spending too much time in my apartment wasn't good for my health or my current situation. I said no at first, but they asked again the next day, and I agreed. We had a great time, and it really helped to lift my spirits. Of course, my girlfriend was wondering where I'd been all day, but I told her I'd been with friends. She was disappointed, but I told her we couldn't. I promised her we would spend all day tomorrow together. I keep getting messages saying I should drop my friends. They say they're manipulating me and influencing my decisions. I know they're good people who look out for me. They helped me quit smoking this year. It's made me more anxious at times, but it's also helped with my health. There's a different type of bond you form with people in our work environment. I trust my colleagues with my life, or at least I do for now. That's most of what happened in the first week. Putting everything in for the second week would make this post triple in length, and it's hard looking back on it as it happened so recently. I still feel raw about it. Posting this update is a way for me to help us process everything. Writing everything out has always been a form of therapy for me. Thanks for your messages. I'll try to reply to those of you who have sent them. I've added some more relevant details. Update 5. This is a very long post, so I just wanted to give you a heads up. I've been holding back posting this for a while. I've been struggling to write because I've been having a lot of emotions. But now that over a month have passed, I think now is the best time to reflect. There might be parts in this post that don't make too much sense chronologically, but I've been writing and taking breaks over multiple attempts, so some past tense might I've been reflecting on where I began and left off, and I realized that when I said the crash of emotions would come, I was right. It was ugly, loud, and could have been easily prevented in parts. When I posted my last update, I was not in the right mental state, so I decided to reflect on the week before and write, which helped to calm my nerves. I'm also a bit embarrassed to admit that I started to smoke again, but it also helped tremendously. My mental state was getting close to a crash, which is why I started smoking again. I didn't have much support from my friends, so I didn't know where else to turn. I couldn't tell them about this breakdown because I didn't want them to get involved. There was a time when my girlfriend was in a bad mood during one of our trips to the city. After we got back, she said I was being dismissive and that I needed to communicate better. I told her that I was uncomfortable with her constant. I needed reassurance and affection, but I didn't get any time alone at home. After so many outings, I was getting physically and emotionally drained. I felt physically tired more than anything, and my girlfriend seemed to take this badly. I really needed to talk to you for the rest of the day, and the next day too. I was in a bad mood during the second day, but I think it would have been better to apologize or communicate better at that point. I could have avoided a lot of this if I'd said something. Instead, I took the time to nap and spend time alone, which I'd rarely had the chance to do for over a week. Then came the third day, when a lot happened. A lot was said. This was the breaking point, which caused further problems throughout the following week. I'll try to be as thorough as I can, remembering everything that happened, from the start of the day to the end. When I'd left, without saying goodbye or speaking to my girlfriend, as I was almost running late. Normally I at least check on her to see what she's doing before I leave. She'd been sleeping in our room for the last. A few days had passed since her mood had dropped. My mood was higher than usual during work. I had had my alone time, was rested, and was just having a nice time at the hospital, which didn't happen too often. There were a few times when my colleagues would go out to eat after work. For the past few weeks, I had been declining, but on this given day, I had joined them. This led to me arriving home around 9 or later, which was pretty late. I had a few drinks with my colleagues. I'm going to stop here because I'm having trouble writing. I arrived home and saw my girlfriend sitting in the living room. She wasn't on her phone or watching TV. She just sat there, looking at something. I asked her what she had been doing. She hadn't been on her phone or watching TV. She just sat there, looking at something. Before I had entered, she asked me where I had been. I said I was out with friends. She immediately asked if they were my friends from work. She knows I work with mostly women and I've mentioned my friends before. I said yes, I was with them and we'd gone out to eat. She asked if I'd been drinking too. I don't know if it was noticeable or just a random question, but I said that I had. There was a long, uncomfortable silence after that. She eventually brought up my 1-month deadline on whether my feelings would change. She asked if I had it. I was taken aback by the question, so I took a minute to reply. I told her I appreciated her efforts, but I was still unsure of our future together and couldn't give her a direct answer. She told me again that during our outings together, I was being dismissive and that she felt I wasn't putting in the same effort. I asked her what she meant by that. I was going out with her and whenever she asked me to do something, I would do it. I tried to find hobbies that she enjoyed and I tried to match her effort. But it just seemed like she was saying it out of neediness. I think it was at this point that she started to lose her composure. She told me that I wasn't smiling when we were outside and that I was quiet and rarely talked. We were spending time together. I told her she already knew how I felt, so some of my mixed feelings shouldn't come as a surprise. But I also explained again that my lack of talking was just from being tired from work. But I don't think she believed me. She told me she's constantly overthinking how I feel. Now that she knows I've lost feelings and doesn't know what she can do to make them come back, I told her again to just find she's got a real passion for something, anything to get her out of bed and active in her life. She says it's been 2 weeks and she's been as active as she can be, to the point that it was causing her mental stress. But my mood wasn't improving and she's wondering if anything will actually change now that it's closer to a month. Then she had a full breakdown, through tears and a broken voice, telling me how much she loves me and how much affection she says she's loved me throughout this relationship, but I've thrown it away over something stupid like my conditions. It's like I was just using them as an excuse to end things. If I ever really loved her, she says, she'd understand. But she's upset, hurt, and betrayed by the one person she still loves and wants to continue our relationship. She says there'll be nothing for her if I leave. There's no one, no place, no future. She'll have no will to live. She won't know what to do with herself. I could have said a lot during this. But I don't think I can accurately convey just how hard she was breaking down emotionally during this exchange. There were points as to where she was almost screaming, completely bawling. And it all just made me freeze. This was the first time I've ever witnessed her fall apart at this level. She goes. On another note, she said there's no reason to live if this is the end. She thinks it won't matter what job she gets, that another month won't be enough. She also knows I still won't want to be with her and that she'll have nothing. After everything was said, she locked herself in our room again and stayed there for a few more days. Whenever I tried to start a conversation, she screamed for me to go away, so I did. A few days later, she'd finally calmed down. We were finally able to speak to each other and she changed her attitude 180 degrees. She was still upset, but extremely apologetic about what she did and said. She told me that a lot of it was just in the moment and she didn't mean it. The days that I was finally able to spend alone without her or my friends gave me the mental strength to finally do what I should have done a month ago. I told her as gently and as calmly as I could that I told her that I thought we were done for good and that I didn't want to be in a relationship with her anymore. I said that I would let her stay for another 2 months until she could find a job and get back on her feet. I also said that if she couldn't do anything by then, I would be gone and moved out. She started to cry again, but in a more defeated manner that almost made me break down. But she agreed to the terms were agreed and that was that. She managed to get a job at a supermarket about a week later, but only part-time at first because that was all they were offering. After our final confrontation, our speaking terms were pretty much dead. Whenever she was off work, she would be in her room, alone for the rest of the day and night. I had stayed on the couch because I was pretty much used to it and didn't really mind. It felt really wrong. I know it sounds selfish, but I felt really free and happy for a while. I didn't tell my colleagues about my breakup straight away. I just said we were working on it. But during that time, I went out with them a lot more after work. Staying in our apartment felt like a chore and I was feeling pretty down. I was on a high that I hadn't felt in a long time. Then everything came crashing down the following week. I ended up getting pneumonia and was off work for about 2 weeks to recover. At first, I thought I had caught a cold, but one day it hit me hard and my lungs felt like they were at 50% capacity. I couldn't take a deep breath without coughing and I was constantly tired. Even now, as I write this update and most of my symptoms have gone, I still have to use an inhaler to help me breathe at times. I was out of action for a few days. I was sleeping for 12 to 14 hours a night. When I told her what I had caught, she saw how sick I was. She offered to let me have the bedroom again, but I said I was fine. She was working part-time, so there was still a lot of time she was spending at home. For the first few days, she left me alone. But by the middle of the first week, I was still sick. She started checking on me now and then to see if I needed anything to eat. To be honest, I didn't like that my illness meant we had to interact. It felt weird and awkward, and I had to depend on her for a few things. Not even a week after we broke up, I didn't feel well enough to get groceries like I normally did. She already worked at a supermarket, so she bought food instead. When I gave her my card, she refused it and said she would buy it herself. I was snacking on fruit and cookies, but she said if I was going to get better, I should eat actual meals. So she began to cook for me, even when I said I didn't want anything. We didn't eat together for the first week, as she went back to her room after checking. She started to sit down with me while I was awake and talk to me during the start of the second week I was home. She told me about her day at work and her colleagues, as well as other things. It felt like a lot of it were things she wanted to tell me earlier but couldn't because everything was still raw. When she started to talk, she didn't stop, and I enjoyed listening to her talk about her day. It felt different. It went from talking to watching TV together during nights I couldn't fall asleep to just talking about our issues that we've been holding to ourselves for a while. It was extremely cathartic. There was no yelling or arguing, just listening. It felt like we hadn't talked in a long time, not since before we got together years ago when we were friends and classmates. Sometime during the second week, I had hit a point where I felt really unwell and didn't want to do anything, but I couldn't sleep because I was coughing. She didn't go to work that day and stayed with me for a long time. We didn't talk, but she made sure I was still eating and drinking water. There's a lot I could say about how those 2 weeks made me feel about my situation with her and everything that had happened, but I can't convey it. I haven't been able to put it into words, let alone write it. But I'll say it was a lot of time to think since I've recovered. I've been trying to have more conversations with her, but I've been trying not to make it feel forced. I know it may have felt forced a month ago. I've been having random conversations about random things. I've been asking her about her photos, how work was going, and if she liked her boss. I've been asking her about her day, her work, her customers, and her coworkers. She's been spending less time in her room and more time in the living room. I've been talking to her about her day and work, customers, and colleagues. In turn, I've been telling her about my day. Over the past few weeks, it's become much more apparent that we're moving from a relationship to a friendship. It's a positive change, as it's easier to communicate. However, there's still a barrier between us, which was formed from our final argument. It's difficult to describe exactly what it is. But there is a deadline that I have set for myself. Moving out is at the end of October, as that's when my lease ends. I'll post another update around that time. This post has turned out to be a lot longer than I thought, but it's nice to look back on everything and see how our situation has been changing for the better. If you're still around reading this, thanks for the continued messages regarding my situation. Sorry if I couldn't reply in the meantime.